Hello, friends. Welcome to the show. I am human, named Andy, and this is my channel. Sorry, I don't know how I got in here. I just. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the show. So glad to see you all once again. And if you're new here, thanks for stopping by. I think you're going to enjoy what we do here on the channel, where we go back and look at cartoons that we grew up on from the 80s and 90s and maybe a little in the 2000s like this one, and talk about them from the perspective of an adult and see if they really hold up over time. And then if you stick around to the end, you can see where I rank this episode in my list of favorite episodes of Batman Beyond. We're just getting towards the end of the second season, and this is a pretty fun episode. Terry's friend dates a robot. It's also a really long title.
And hey, it's gonna be wild.
They really kind of doubled down on the high school drama element in this episode, and it almost feels a little bit more like a sitcom than a Batman episode. And in some ways, that's kind of fun and kind of an interesting break from some of the other episodes. But does it really hold up as a great Batman Beyond episode? Well, we'll talk all about that right after our 60-second Beyond Bomb breakdown. Give you a complete rundown of the episode in 60 seconds or less. And I don't want to jinx myself, but I've been doing pretty okay on this for a little while. So let's see if I can get it. We see Terry and Bruce training in the Batcave, and Terry breaks one of the robots that look like Killer Croc, I think it was. And then Bruce goes, "Oh, that's great, but now you got to go pick up a new one of these robots after school." And then we go to see him at school, and his friend Howard is kind of going around trying to set up this party, and he's trying to be cool, and nobody likes him, and he's a nerd, and he just wants to have a girlfriend like one of the pretty girls in the school. And then he sees that Terry's driving the Bruce Wayne's car, and he goes, "Oh, cool, can I get a lift? Sure, I got to run an errand." And they go to this factory to get a new robot. Terry gets off to sign some papers, and Howard finds this guy that's making these robotic women, and he goes, "Oh, do you want one? Sure, here's my dad's credit card." And he buys one, and then he shows up at school, and there's this really perfect girl that he's now dating, and she's completely devoted to Howard, and he's going around school, and now all of a sudden he's really popular, and he's fun, and he's cool, and all this. But then the girl starts getting jealous of the other girls that Howard likes, and then she starts acting out and pushing lockers over and doing all these horrible things, and then the bomb blows up. But then he has his party, and all it seems to be going well. But then Howard feels like, "Oh, you're too jealous. I'm just doing what I'm programmed to do. You wanted me to completely devoted to you, and I am." And then he goes, "Oh, I want to see other women." And then he goes, "Oh," she short circuits, and then Batman has to swoop in and save the day. And in the process, the house blows up and comes down, and he's trying to see if he's still popular, and nobody cares about him anymore. And he had that little fling, and then his parents get home, and Homer Simpson is his dad and yells at him. I was doing well. I shouldn't have said that at the beginning.
Better, though your execution could use more finesse.
I have to say, this episode actually started off kind of on a really positive note. It was interesting to see Bruce and Terry training. I mean, for one, we got to see the old Rogues Gallery. We got to see Riddler and Two-Face and Killer Croc, and that was kind of interesting. And I had an assumption as it was starting to unfold that, like, oh, this must be a simulation or something of that sort. But it was cool to see the old Rogues Gallery, and also it was neat to see Terry training. And once I saw that, I realized that we haven't been seeing much of that. You know, in the old show, again, I don't mean to compare it, but that's my base of memory, is we saw Terry wasn't even born then. We saw Bruce and Dick Grayson and Tim Drake in the later ones, all of them training Batgirl. It felt like something that we checked into often, of them training and keeping their skills sharp and all that kind of thing. And so it reminded me when I saw this, oh yeah, we haven't been seeing much of that. So that was neat. It was cool to see them training on that front.
Hey, it gets the job done.
I mentioned it before how Terry really wasn't a skilled fighter beforehand, and he's got this suit that enhances him and gives him better skills. Sure, true enough. But at the same time, it was like, I want to see, I'm sure he has been training, but I want to see that process. I want to see what he's been doing and how that's been working for him. And this episode gives us a glimpse at that.
Not too shabby, huh?
I thought it was funny that when we saw Bruce's car, Terry gets to drive Bruce's car, one of the perks of working for Bruce Wayne, I guess. And to me, I don't know if this was deliberate or not. It had to have been. It had to have been deliberate. But his car looked a whole lot like the Batmobile. And I guess at this point, people haven't seen that Batmobile on the streets in a long time. So maybe their memory's not as clear. But to me, I'm looking at that car going, wouldn't you connect the dots and go, wait a minute. Yeah, Bruce Wayne has a car like the Batmobile. But of course, if you're super rich like Bruce Wayne and you just like the Batmobile, you'd be like, yeah, sure. Hey, build me one of those. I don't know. Seemed a little obvious.
Oh, if I had wheels like these.
So this is kind of a cool premise and something that we've seen before where we have robots that look human. What was it? Heart of Steel, the episode that I have up here, where we saw clones of Jim Gordon and Bruce Wayne, or Batman at least. And we saw these clones that were created by this robot company. And that's one of my favorite episodes. And so I like this premise that they kind of brought that back in there. It was Hardak. Hardak was the name of the company that was doing that. I thought that could have been an interesting, nice little, even just an Easter egg, just to go, the company that they went to was Hardak or Hardak Incorporated or something like that could have been tied into there. And they didn't go that route, and that's fine. But it seems like they took this kind of neat premise of robots impersonating humans and just took a very juvenile way into it for a rich kid that has his parents' credit cards to go, well, I could just purchase a girlfriend robot. And because I want to be popular and I want to have a party and I want to have all the kids there.
Ah, you want a custom job.
It felt like this show was struggling a little bit with the identity of what Batman Beyond is. And again, I don't know what the backstory is on some of these episodes, that if it was a mandate from the network to go, hey, we need a more lighthearted episode, which is very much what this one felt like. But then there was still a lot of action and fighting and things like that. And it was almost like they're kind of trying to toe the line between two different things. And it was like it wasn't strong one way or the other. Even the music in this episode sort of reminded me of the old Dennis the Menace cartoon. It just had that very silly kind of, oh, here comes Howard. And it was just, like they were just struggling a little bit with what they wanted the episode to be. And they took this great premise and I felt like kind of maybe wasted it on this episode.
Your friend got a name, Groot? Cynthia.
But I do get an answer to my question. They finally mention hockey pads attached to this sport that I had no idea what it was when I was talking about it in the Winning Edge up here. And I think somebody mentioned that in the comments too, that it was some version of hockey where you throw the puck instead of, it's like a cross between hockey and lacrosse or something. But at least I got the answer to my question.
Good thing he was still wearing his hockey pads.
To further prove my point that this was more of a high school drama, we're about halfway through the episode, and the worst crime that we've seen is this robot pushed over some lockers. And, could have hurt somebody, could have killed somebody, but that was the worst thing we've seen. And then we see Terry, again, just putting on the Batman suit, which, again, we haven't seen Terry as Batman in this episode other than the beginning up to this point. So here we spent the whole first half of the episode in high school and this kid that wants to be popular. That's very much a sitcom plot. Again, I'm not trying to compare it to the old Batman, but for me, for my purposes, for what I want to see out of a action adventure cartoon is, well, action and adventure. And here we're dealing with some high school drama. And there's plenty of cartoons that are out there that I also enjoy that are kind of more in that structure. And I don't mind it because that's what they are.
Are you nuts? This is the boys' locker room.
Yeah, I can smell the mildew. What's up?
And then once again, after Dana took Terry back after Rats, which you can see that episode up here where he treated her horrible and she ended up getting kidnapped and taken into a sewer by this rat kid. and she had to try to save herself. And then at the end of the episode, she takes him back. I forgive you. Oh, I still love you. And here we are. How many episodes later? Again, he's got to tell Max,
Oh, and let Dana know I'll be a little late.
dump him already. Dana, it's for your own good. Dump him. He's not worth it. And again, it's not like, oh, I got to go stop the Joker. It's oh, I got to investigate this robot girlfriend that my friend has. It's one thing to go, oh, I've got to stop the city from blowing up. Or a great opportunity would have been in the last episode, Babel, where we were talking about him being called out and saying, well, I want Batman or we're going to destroy the city. Well, that's a pretty good excuse that, like, hey, Dana, I'm going to be late. But they didn't use it then. They used it now that, like, oh, let Dana know that I'm gonna be late again. He doesn't even tell her herself. Like, and see, here I am, getting wrapped up in the high school drama of it all.
You live dangerously, McGinnis.
And here's what's crazy, and this is very much what makes it a comedy, is Howard gets exactly what he wanted. That's a very common sitcom plot of, like, somebody wants something so bad and then they get it and find out it's not what they wanted. That's got comedy written all over it. Or tragedy. That could also be... But there's a lot of parallels to comedy and tragedy. I won't get into all that. But the point is that Howard wants a girl that's completely devoted to him and somebody that's beautiful and perfect, brightest green eyes and all this kind of stuff. And he gets that. And he wanted her personality. He tells the guy, I want the personality to be...
She's got to be completely devoted to me.
That's exactly what she is. And then yet that's not good enough. And he realized, oh, I don't want somebody obsessed with me. I want to be able to date other girls. I want to be a player in the party game and all that. And so that's where comedy ensues. And also where the action of the episode comes place, which is, I guess, the malfunction of the robot is her being denied her core operative of being, oh, I have to be completely devoted to you, and you're saying you're rejecting me, and that makes her short circuit. That felt like a little bit of a stretch too.
I want to see other girls.
So it's kind of tough for me when I'm looking at this episode and I'm wanting it to be an action adventure episode, and it really isn't. You know, for me, I'm watching it going, well, the stakes aren't high enough, because even though she's getting violent and fighting back, it's too easy to say, like, oh, well, then just turn off the power, you know, the shutdown operation of this robot or whatever to get out of that. The Batman now comes in and he's fighting, saving the day. And it felt too, like you had two different genres of shows competing with each other. And it's like, well, we got to make this high school drama, but we also got to keep this action adventure show. And so how do you blend the two? Well, now the stakes are just kind of high school and not high enough. You know, she's not holding the city for ransom. She's not trying to blow up City Hall. She's not doing those things that really deserve Batman's attention. But then again, the mission should match the character. So I'm going, well, at the same time, the whole point of the show is a high school or teenage Batman. And that's what it is. So sometimes it's really tough for me to really analyze these episodes and be fair to them, because this just isn't quite my style or my preference in what I want to see in the episodes.
You wouldn't be the jealous type, would you, Cynthia?
The antagonist of this episode is just a malfunctioning robot. You know, not even a robot that has the, you know, that short-circuited and now has its own objectives. It's just taking its programming too seriously. You know, or even that classic sci-fi AI robot story where, oh, they realize to have a perfect society, they got to eliminate humans. It's not even that. It's just, oh, she's just malfunctioning and causing problems.
Howard, you can't do this to me.
I've been pretty hard on this episode. I'll give you some positives. One, I never noticed this before, but in the credits is, it sounds kind of funny that I'm going to give you a positive and it has to do with the credits. Darwin Cook was the storyboard artist on this episode. If that name doesn't sound familiar, he's the comic book artist that did the New Frontier graphic novel and a couple other series. He did a reinvention of the Spirit which was pretty good. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm like looking it up. Is he the same Darwin Cook? I didn't realize that he was involved in that. And he also was credited as designing. He's always been credited in the show for the opening main title sequence, which I had no idea that he was involved in that. So he's one of my favorite artists, and so that was cool to see that he was involved in the show in general, but specifically in this episode.
Great. Cool. Friday night.
Also, I will say that the technician clone robot element was kind of neat. Another little throwback to the Heart of Steel episode, but that was kind of neat. And that was kind of a neat moment in the episode and caught me by surprise. So that was good. And also the appearance of Dan Caslinetta, or not appearance, the hearing of Dan Caslinetta as Howard's dad, but also I think that he appeared as a couple other bit characters in there. So that was kind of odd. Like, it wasn't a featured voice, but like, I don't know, I guess Dan Caslinetta was available for the day, and they were like, hey, could you do half a dozen voices in this show? And he did that, which I thought was kind of fun. And this was in the heyday of Simpsons. So it was 89. This is 99, 2000. So, you know, this is season 10 or 11 of Simpsons. I mean, that was like right in their prime. So yeah, kind of interesting that he took that on. So there's some good things to the episode.
He certainly goes through a lot of these synthoids.
Again, even having the house blow up felt more like a comedy. They had that stoner kid that came through and was like,
Sway party, Howard. It takes real guts to blow up your own home.
also just having Homer Simpson sounding dad just made it kind of comical that like
What in blazes did you buy with it? Dynamite?
felt again just very much like a Dennis the Menace is what comes to mind. And in that show, Dennis the Menace did some horrible things to Wilson and very destructive things to his property, but we laughed about it because of the context that it was in. And it felt the same thing with this, that the stakes weren't that high that you're like, oh gosh, he blew up the house, that sounds serious. It was just more of a comedic kind of ba-dum-bump.
I think Howard needs some quality time alone with his folks.
You think they'll ground him?
So when it comes time to rank this episode, it's probably to no one's surprise that it's not going to rank very high on my list. And it's not that it's a bad episode. I mean, it was enjoyable, and I had fun watching it. And it was kind of nice to have a little bit of a break and kind of something a little different than some of the other episodes. I sort of wish that they would have just went full comedy. I've mentioned it before, but Batman Brave and the Bold is fun because it is so lighthearted and that kind of Silver Age of comics sort of genre and feels. And they just really lean into that and kind of break the fourth wall at different points and make these weird kind of obscure references to some of the comics. And I sort of wish they would have went that direction with the show, and maybe they weren't brave enough to do that at that point in time. It was like, if you want to do a comedy, do a comedy, and I would have had fun with it. But on the other hand, it's like that's not what they set the show out to be, so it would feel very off track if they did that. But I don't feel like this one was close enough to what Batman Beyond has been. So it just felt like kind of this weird, mushy middle ground. So for all those reasons, it falls at the number 21 spot of my favorite episodes so far. It's just below Revenant, because Revenant, I know, was not a true ghost story, and we kind of had that red herring beginning of the episode. But it was still like, it felt like a bit of a more threat in the episode than just, oh, here's a malfunctioning robot. But I do have it beating out Winning Edge because that, again, just feels like a PSA for drug use, not to do drugs, anti-drug, whatever you call it, wrapped around this sports thing. And just that episode felt like a throwaway episode. So anytime an episode kind of is stacked up against that one, I typically nudge it above it.
How could this be any worse?
So I've been kind of hard on this episode, but let me know, what do you think about kind of the high school angle on this show? Which is, again, weird for me because I was in high school. I was literally about the age of Terry when the show came out. And I don't know if it's just that I wasn't watching it at that time, But again, I don't think it was necessarily made for high schoolers. It feels more directed at middle schoolers and maybe younger. So let me know. I mean, were you in that age range when this episode came out? And did you like more of the high school style stories? Do those work for you? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this episode, please click the like button. If you want to see more episodes like this, just hit subscribe. I have new episodes coming out every week. But if you can't wait till then, I have some episodes over here that you can catch up on some of my past reviews. But be sure to stay tuned because next week I'll be talking about the episode Eyewitness. So you don't want to miss that. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'm Andy Knode. I'll see you soon.